The morning sun filtered through towering Oregon pines as Daniel Harper raised his axe above the weathered chopping block. 3 years of solitude had transformed the former tech CEO into something unrecognizable. Beard grown wild, hands calloused from honest work, expensive business suits replaced by worn flannel and denim. His cabin sat hidden deep in the forest, built with his own hands from fallen timber and salvaged materials. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, a reminder of his previous life's knowledge serving his new existence. Daniel split another log with practiced precision, the sharp crack echoing through the silence. This ritual grounded him. No board meetings, no investor calls, no betrayals disguised as handshakes. Just wood, steel, and the honest ache of physical labor. He stacked the split pieces methodically, preparing for Oregon's harsh winter still months away. Planning ahead had kept him alive out here. That and the bitter determination to never depend on another human being again. Inside the cabin, he brewed coffee over the wood stove, the rich aroma mixing with pine smoke. On the rough-hewn table sat a drawer he rarely opened, containing the last remnants of his former life. A Rolex Submariner worth more than most people's cars, now nothing but a painful reminder. Business magazines, once his daily reading, served as fire starter. Forbes, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, all feeding the flames that cooked his simple meals. The distant rumble of an engine shattered the morning peace like a gunshot. Daniel froze, coffee mug halfway to his lips. In 3 years, no vehicle had climbed this forgotten mountain road. The sound grew louder, closer, accompanied by the crunch of tires on gravel. His pulse quickened as headlights pierced through the tree line, cutting through shadows that had protected his solitude for so long. Margaret Harper stepped from the rental sedan like she was entering a courtroom, her tailored business suit absurdly formal against the wilderness backdrop. At 42, she retained the sharp intelligence that made her Millbrook Valley's most successful lawyer, though worry lines now creased her face. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, not a strand out of place despite the rough mountain drive. "Hello, Danny," she said quietly, using the childhood name he thought buried with his past. "It's been 3 years." Daniel emerged from his cabin slowly, axe still gripped in his weathered hands. The brother she remembered, clean-shaven, confident, always in control, had vanished. This man looked like a mountain hermit, wild and suspicious. "How did you find me, Maggie?" "I'm a lawyer. I find people for a living." She studied his primitive homestead with barely concealed concern. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." Daniel's voice carried the rough edge of disuse. "I made my position clear when I left. Dad's had a stroke." The words hit harder than his axe on pine. "A bad one. He's asking for you." Daniel's grip tightened on the axe handle. Robert Harper, the man who raised him, taught him integrity, then stood by silently as Daniel's world collapsed in accusations and scandal. He made his choice when it mattered. I made mine. "The farm is failing, Danny. Without help, that's not my problem anymore." But even as he spoke, childhood memories flickered. Helping with harvest, learning to drive the old tractor, his father's proud smile at his college graduation. Maggie stepped closer, her expensive heels sinking into forest loam. "I know you're hurt. I know why you ran. But hiding in the woods won't change what happened." "I'm not hiding. I'm living." Daniel gestured toward his carefully tended garden, his hand-built workshop. "For the first time in my life, I'm actually living instead of just surviving other people's greed." "Dad's dying, Danny. The doctors say he might not make it through the month. The farm he spent 40 years building is about to be foreclosed." Tears threatened her composed facade. "I can't save it alone. I can't save him alone." The sound of another engine made them both turn. A second set of headlights wound up the mountain road, following the path Maggie had broken. Daniel's jaw tightened as he realized his sister hadn't come alone. "Who else did you bring to my sanctuary, Maggie?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Nobody." "I came alone." The approaching vehicle's engine grew louder, more aggressive than her rental sedan. "Danny, I didn't—" Daniel dropped the axe and moved toward his cabin with predatory alertness. "Get inside, now." "What's wrong? Someone followed you?" His survival instincts, honed by 3 years of isolation, screamed danger. In the forest, uninvited guests usually mean trouble. The second vehicle stopped just beyond the tree line, engine idling, but headlights dark. No doors open, no voices called out, just waiting, watching. Daniel felt the familiar chill of being hunted, the same feeling that drove him into these mountains years ago. Maggie grabbed his arm as he reached for the cabin door. "Danny, we have to talk about Dad, about the farm, about what really happened to your company." He paused, hand on the rough wooden handle he'd carved himself. "What do you mean? What really happened?" "I mean, maybe it's time you learn the truth about why everything fell apart." Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "And why someone might have followed me here tonight." The mysterious vehicle's engine revved once, a clear message before tires crunched slowly away down the mountain. But Daniel knew they'd be back. They always came back. Inside the cabin's dim interior, heated by the wood stove's steady warmth, Maggie examined her brother's Spartan lifestyle. No running water, no electricity except solar power, no internet connection to the world he'd abandoned. Shelves lined with preserved foods, medical supplies, basic tools, everything necessary for complete self-sufficiency. It impressed and saddened her simultaneously. "You really have been living like a hermit," she murmured, settling onto a hand-hewn wooden chair. "I prefer free man." Daniel poured coffee into a second mug, muscle memory of hospitality overriding 3 years of solitude. No shareholders, no board meetings, no backstabbing partners, no lawyers either. Present company reluctantly accepted. "Danny, about Dad. Robert Harper disowned me publicly when the scandal broke. Called me an embarrassment to the family name. Told reporters he raised me better than that." The words came out flat, emotionless. "So why should I care if he's dying? Because he never got to tell you the truth. Because I never got to tell you the truth." Maggie leaned forward intensely. "Your business partner didn't just betray you, Danny. Someone orchestrated the whole thing. Someone with connections in Millbrook Valley." Daniel's hand stilled on his coffee mug. "What are you talking about?" "The farm's been under financial pressure for 2 years. Not just bad crops, deliberate sabotage. Someone's been systematically destroying small farms throughout the county, forcing sales to a development company." She paused, choosing words carefully. "The same company that bought your tech firm's assets after the bankruptcy." The cabin seemed to shrink around them as implications sank in. Daniel's exile, his father's farm crisis, even Maggie's unexpected visit, connected by invisible threads he was only beginning to see. "Who?" His voice carried dangerous quiet. "Thomas Wright. He owns half the county now, including the bank that holds Dad's mortgage. He's been waiting for you to surface, Danny. I think I may have just led him right to you." Outside, the forest held its breath, and somewhere in the darkness, engines waited to return. The Harper family farm stretched across Millbrook Valley like a faded photograph, its once proud buildings now sagging under neglect and debt. Daniel stood beside Maggie's rental car, surveying the devastation with hollow eyes. Broken fence posts leaned at drunken angles, fields choked with weeds instead of crops, and the red barn's paint peeled like sunburned skin. This was his childhood paradise, reduced to ruins. "It's worse than I thought," he murmured, shouldering the duffel bag containing his few possessions. 3 years of forest living had taught him to travel light, but returning to this place felt like carrying the weight of every mistake he'd ever made. Maggie led him toward the farmhouse, her heels clicking against cracked concrete. "Dad's been trying to keep up appearances, but the stroke hit him hard. He can barely walk, let alone manage the property." The screen door hung askew on rusted hinges. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and fading memories. Daniel's childhood home had shrunk somehow, or maybe he'd grown too large for these rooms filled with ghosts. Family photographs lined the hallway, his high school graduation, college acceptance letter, the newspaper clipping announcing his tech startup's first million in revenue. All of it ending with the Forbes article that destroyed everything. Tech Wunderkinds Fall from Grace, how Daniel Harper lost it all. Robert Harper sat in a wheelchair by the living room window, his powerful frame diminished by illness. At 68, the man who once lifted hay bales like feathers now struggled to hold a coffee cup steady. His gray eyes, still sharp despite everything, tracked Daniel's approach with mixture of hope and fear. "You came back," Robert whispered, his speech slurred but understandable. Daniel kept his distance, arms crossed defensively. "Don't read too much into it. Maggie said you were dying. I figured I should see for myself." "Danny, it's Daniel now. Danny died 3 years ago, along with everything else." Robert's weathered face crumpled with pain, deeper than physical illness. "I know. I know I failed you. When the scandal broke, when the reporters came, I should have stood by you, should have believed in my son. But you didn't." Daniel's voice carried the bitter edge of old wounds. "You went on TV, called me an embarrassment, said you raised me better. Remember that interview, Dad? Because I do. Every word." Maggie touched Daniel's shoulder gently. "He was protecting the farm. Thomas Wright threatened foreclosure if Dad publicly supported you. He had to choose between you and keeping the land in the family. So he chose the land." Daniel stared out the window at the failing fields. "How'd that work out?" Through the glass, he noticed men in corporate suits walking the property lines with surveying equipment. They moved with the confidence of people who already owned what they were measuring. Daniel's jaw tightened as one surveyor planted a small flag near the old oak tree where he'd built his first treehouse. "Who are those men?" "Wright Development," Maggie said quietly. "They've been coming around for weeks, measuring everything. Thomas says it's routine preparation for the foreclosure auction." The front door opened without warning, and a man in an expensive suit entered like he owned the place. James Morrison, Millbrook Valley Bank president, carried a leather briefcase and the smug expression of someone delivering bad news with pleasure. "Well, well, the prodigal son returns." Morrison set his briefcase on the kitchen table with theatrical precision. "Perfect timing, actually. I have documents that require signatures." Daniel studied the banker's face, recognizing the type immediately. Small-town power broker, drunk on authority over people's lives. "Let me guess. Foreclosure papers." "Indeed." Morrison opened his briefcase with ceremony, revealing neat stacks of legal documents. "Your father has 30 days to settle the outstanding debt of $400,000, plus accumulated interest and penalties. Since that's clearly impossible, we'll be proceeding with auction proceedings." 30 days? Maggie stood behind her father's wheelchair protectively. "We were told we had until the end of the year." "Circumstances change, Miss Harper. Mr. Wright has decided to accelerate the timeline." Morrison's smile held no warmth. "Of course, if young Daniel here wants to assume responsibility for the debt, I'm sure arrangements could be made." Daniel felt the trap closing around them. Wright wasn't just foreclosing on the farm. He was drawing Daniel back into the open, making him vulnerable again. "What's the real game here, Morrison?" "No game, just business." The banker's eyes glittered with malice. "Though I suspect Mr. Wright would be very interested to know you've returned to the valley. Very interested indeed." After Morrison left with his threats hanging in the air like smoke, Daniel paced the farmhouse kitchen while Maggie made coffee with shaking hands. Robert sat slumped in his wheelchair, defeat written across his features like a death sentence. 400,000, Daniel muttered. "How did it get so high?" "Bad crops 3 years running," Robert managed. "Equipment failures. Medical bills after the stroke. Interest compounds fast when you can't make payments. Plus Thomas Wright's been systematically sabotaging small farms," Maggie added. "Contaminated seed supplies, equipment accidents, regulatory harassment. He drives down property values, then swoops in with development offers." Daniel stopped pacing. "You're saying he orchestrated Dad's financial problems?" "I'm saying the timing was awfully convenient. Right after your business collapsed, suddenly Dad couldn't get credit anywhere. The bank called in loans that had been stable for years. Suppliers demanded cash up front, almost like someone was coordinating the pressure." The pieces clicked together in Daniel's mind like gears in a machine he understood too well. Corporate warfare, but played out in rural Oregon instead of Silicon Valley boardrooms. "He's been hunting me this whole time, using the farm as bait." "That's what I think," The question is why? Maggie sat across from him at the scarred wooden table where he'd done homework as a child. Your tech company was worth maybe 10 million at its peak. Why would Thomas Wright destroy lives over that kind of money? Daniel considered the question, his programmer's mind analyzing patterns and connections. Wright Development had resources far beyond what foreclosing on small farms could provide. The man was playing a longer game, something that required Daniel specifically to surface. Maybe it's not about money, he said slowly. Maybe it's about something I know or something I can do. Something worth more than the farm or the business. Robert struggled to speak, his words coming in painful bursts. Danny, there's something I never told you about Wright. About why he hates our family. But before Robert could continue, headlights swept across the farmhouse windows. A black SUV pulled into the driveway with aggressive confidence, followed by a second vehicle. Daniel moved to the window and saw Thomas Wright himself stepping from the lead car. Tall, silver-haired, wearing the kind of expensive suit that announced power and wealth. Speak of the devil, Maggie whispered. Wright approached the house with two companions who looked more like corporate security than farmers. He didn't knock, instead opening the screen door and entering like he already owned the place. Daniel Harper, Wright said, his cultured voice carrying decades of authority. The hermit emerges from his cave. How remarkably convenient. At 65, Thomas Wright embodied old money confidence with his perfectly styled silver hair and $1,000 suit. He surveyed the humble farmhouse with the disdain of someone accustomed to much finer surroundings, his pale blue eyes calculating and cold. Mr. Wright, Daniel replied evenly, come to gloat over your handiwork? Gloat? My dear boy, I'm here to offer salvation. Wright gestured toward the failing farm visible through the windows. This property has tremendous potential for development. Shopping centers, housing subdivisions, industrial parks. I'm prepared to offer your family a very generous settlement. In exchange for what? Wright's smile reminded Daniel of a shark sensing blood in the water. Your cooperation on a small technical matter. You see, your former company possessed certain intellectual property that interests me greatly. Code repositories, algorithm designs, client databases. Unfortunately, your former partner was rather uncooperative before his unfortunate accident. Daniel's blood turned to ice. What accident? Marcus fell down some stairs at his apartment complex. A tragic, really. Hit his head quite badly. He's been in a coma for 6 months now. Wright delivered this information with casual cruelty. Apparently, he'd encrypted all the company's core assets before the bankruptcy. Only you have the access codes. And if I don't cooperate? Wright gestured toward Robert in his wheelchair. Your father's condition is quite delicate. Stress can trigger additional strokes, you know, and this farm foreclosure process can be quite stressful for elderly men in poor health. Maggie stepped forward protectively. Are you threatening our father? I'm offering a business proposition. Daniel provides the codes, I forgive the farm's debt, and ensure your father receives the best possible medical care. Everyone wins. Daniel studied Wright's face, recognizing the predator beneath the polished exterior. This man had orchestrated everything. The business betrayal, the farm's financial ruin, even Marcus's accident. He'd spent 3 years hunting Daniel through financial warfare and family pressure. What's really on those servers, Wright? What's worth destroying lives over? Wright's composure cracked slightly. Let's just say your little startup was more valuable than you realized. The defense contracts alone are worth hundreds of millions. But without your encryption keys, it's all worthless code. Defense contracts? Daniel's mind raced. We never had any government clients. Marcus was more entrepreneurial than you knew. He'd been selling your AI algorithms to some very interested parties. Foreign governments, private military contractors, intelligence agencies. Your code can crack encryption systems, predict market behaviors, even influence social media algorithms on a massive scale. The horrible truth crashed over Daniel like a cold wave. His innocent startup hadn't just failed, it had been weaponized by his partner and then stolen by Wright. The Hermit years had been protection not just from shame, but from being forced to unleash digital weapons on the world. "I won't do it," Daniel said quietly. "I won't give you the codes." Wright's mask of civility finally slipped completely. "Then your father dies slowly. Your sister loses her law practice to mysterious malpractice accusations, and this farm becomes a parking lot. I've waited 3 years for you to surface, Mr. Harper. I can wait a little longer while I systematically destroy everything you care about." "Get out of my house," Robert managed to say, his voice stronger than it had been all day. Wright straightened his expensive tie and moved toward the door. "You have 24 hours to reconsider, Daniel. After that, I start getting creative with my persuasion techniques." As the SUVs disappeared into the gathering dusk, Daniel realized his hermit sanctuary was gone forever. Wright had found him, cornered him, and now the only question was how many people would suffer for Daniel's attempt to disappear from a world that wouldn't let him go. That night, Daniel sat alone on the farmhouse porch while his father slept, and Maggie worked frantically on legal documents that couldn't save them. The familiar weight of impossible choices pressed down on him like Oregon's winter fog. Give Wright the codes and unleash digital weapons on the world, or watch his family suffer for his moral stand. 3 years of forest solitude had taught him that some burdens couldn't be shared or escaped. The old porch swing creaked under his weight as memories flooded back. Summer evenings helping his father plan next season's crops. Maggie practicing debate arguments while fireflies danced in the growing darkness. This place held every good memory of his childhood, and now it would become another casualty in Wright's war against the Harper family. Robert's bedroom light glowed through thin curtains as medical equipment beeped softly in the night. His father's confession hung unfinished between them like a sword waiting to fall. What secret had Robert carried all these years about Wright's hatred for their family? What connection ran deeper than business rivalry or land development schemes? Daniel pulled out his phone, the first time he'd powered it on since fleeing to the mountains. Dozens of missed calls from reporters, former colleagues, business associates, all the vultures who'd picked his professional corpse clean 3 years ago. But buried among them were messages from Marcus, sent before the accident that put him in a coma. "Danny, they know about the contracts. Wright's people have been asking questions. The encryption protocols you built are more powerful than we realized. Someone's been reverse engineering our code. If something happens to me, remember the failsafe we discussed. The one you said would never be necessary." Daniel's hands trembled as he read the final message, sent the night before Marcus's fall. "They're coming for you next. Disappear. Trust no one except family." The phone slipped from his fingers, clattering on the porch boards. Marcus hadn't betrayed him. Marcus had tried to warn him. The defense contracts, the foreign sales, all of it had been Wright's manipulation from the beginning. His former partner was another victim, not the villain Daniel had believed for 3 years of bitter exile. Inside the house, glass shattered. Daniel bolted upright as Maggie's scream pierced the night silence. He crashed through the screen door to find his sister standing in the kitchen, surrounded by broken window glass and a brick wrapped in paper lying among the scattered fragments. "Are you hurt?" Daniel grabbed Maggie's shoulders, checking for cuts. "I'm fine, just startled." She unwrapped the paper from the brick with shaking hands. "It's a message." The note was typed on expensive letterhead. "Wright Development Corporation. Mr. Harper, since you missed our deadline, allow me to demonstrate my seriousness. Your sister's law office suffered a small fire tonight. Nothing irreplaceable was lost this time. You have 12 hours to reconsider. T.W. My office." Maggie's face went pale. "All my case files, client records, everything I've worked for." Daniel was already moving toward the door. "Stay with Dad. Keep the lights off and stay away from windows." "Where are you going?" "To end this." He grabbed his jacket and the keys to Maggie's rental car. "Wright wants a war? He's about to get one." The drive to town took 20 minutes through winding mountain roads, but Daniel's mind traveled much further back, to late nights coding with Marcus, building something they believed would revolutionize data security, to the moment they realized their algorithms could predict and influence human behavior on a massive scale, to Marcus's suggestion that they build a failsafe, a kill switch that could destroy everything they'd created if it fell into the wrong hands. Millbrook Valley slept peacefully under streetlights that hadn't changed since Daniel's childhood. The Harper and Associates law office sat on Main Street between the hardware store and Claire's diner, its windows now boarded with plywood. Fire damage blackened the brick walls around the entrance, and yellow caution tape fluttered in the night breeze like funeral ribbons. Daniel parked across the street and studied the destruction. Professional arson, designed to send a message without completely destroying the building. Wright's people knew exactly how much pressure to apply, how to escalate without crossing lines that would bring federal investigators. "Surveying my work?" Thomas Wright's voice came from the shadows beside the hardware store. He stepped into the streetlight's glow, flanked by the same two men who'd accompanied him to the farm. "I told you I was serious about deadlines." "You made your point." Daniel kept his hands visible but ready. 3 years in the wilderness had taught him to assess threats quickly, and Wright's companions were clearly more than corporate lawyers. "Did I? Because your sister's office was just the appetizer. Next comes your father's medical care. Such unfortunate complications can arise when stroke patients don't receive proper medication. After that, well, I'm sure I can find creative ways to motivate you." "What do you really want, Wright? The truth this time?" Wright's cultured smile faltered slightly. "I want what your father stole from me 40 years ago. I want the justice this family has avoided for far too long. Your little computer codes are just the cherry on top." 40 years, Daniel's mind raced. What happened 40 years ago? Ask your father if he lives long enough to tell you, though I suspect his conscience will kill him before his medical condition does. Wright checked his expensive watch. "You have until dawn to bring me the encryption keys. After that, I start dismantling your family piece by piece. And if I give you the codes, your father gets the best medical care money can buy, your sister's law practice survives, and the farm stays in family hands. You'll even get a generous consulting contract to maintain the systems I'll be implementing. Everyone wins. Everyone except the countless people who would suffer when Wright's military clients deployed weaponized algorithms against civilian populations." Daniel had seen the projections. His code could manipulate elections, trigger market crashes, even incite social unrest through targeted misinformation campaigns. "I need more time." "Time is the one commodity you lack, Mr. Harper." Dawn comes early in October. Back at the farm, Daniel found Maggie waiting in the darkened kitchen with a shotgun across her lap. The determined set of her jaw reminded him of their mother during difficult calving seasons. Harper women didn't back down when their family was threatened. "Did you see the office?" "Yeah." Daniel slumped into the chair across from her. "How bad is it?" 20 years of work. Case files, client records, financial documents. Even if insurance covers the building repairs, I'll never recover the client relationships. Wright just destroyed my career as a warning shot. "I'm sorry, Maggie, this is my fault." "No." Her voice carried steel beneath the exhaustion. "This is Wright's fault. And Dad's fault for keeping secrets that put us all in danger." She set the shotgun aside and leaned forward intensely. "What aren't you telling me about those encryption codes?" Daniel weighed his options, then decided his sister deserved the truth. "The algorithms Marcus and I developed can do more than protect data. In the wrong hands, they're weapons. Digital weapons that can manipulate information flow, influence mass behavior, even bring down government systems. Wright isn't just stealing business assets. He's planning to sell military-grade cyber warfare tools to the highest bidders. Then we can't let him have them. If I don't cooperate, he'll kill Dad and destroy you. If I do cooperate, the technology gets weaponized against innocent people worldwide. Either choice means blood on my hands." Maggie stood abruptly, pacing to the window where Wright's men had thrown the brick. "There has to be a third option. There's always a third option in chess. You taught me that when we were kids." "This isn't chess. This is war." "Then maybe it's time to stop playing defense." She turned back to him with fierce determination. "What did Marcus mean about a failsafe?" "You mentioned it when you were reading his messages." Daniel hesitated, then realized concealment had already cost them too much. "We built a kill switch into the core algorithms, a way to permanently destroy the technology if it was ever misused. But activating it would wipe out everything. Not just Wright's stolen copies, but every legitimate application of the research. Years of work gone? Years of work that should never have existed in the first place. Daniel felt the weight of creating something too dangerous for the world to possess. Marcus wanted insurance against exactly this scenario. He was smarter than either of us realized. Can you activate this failsafe remotely? Theoretically, but I'd need access to the original servers, and Wright's people have those locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Plus, there's no guarantee the kill switch would work after 3 years of system modifications. Maggie moved to their father's desk and pulled out a manila folder thick with legal documents. Maybe we don't need to destroy the technology. Maybe we just need to destroy Wright's legal claim to it. What do you mean? I mean, your former partner may have been smarter than Wright realized too. She spread documents across the kitchen table. Corporate filings, patent applications, licensing agreements. Marcus filed these papers 2 weeks before his accident. He transferred all intellectual property rights to a foundation he established in your name. Legally, Wright owns nothing but empty server shells. Daniel stared at the papers, hope and disbelief warring in his chest. Marcus protected the assets? More than that, he created a legal framework that makes you the sole authorized user of the technology. Wright can torture us all he wants, but he can't legally deploy the algorithms without your written consent, which he'll never get, which means his entire empire is built on stealing technology he can't actually use. Maggie's smile held the predatory satisfaction of a lawyer who'd found the perfect precedent. Wright may have the servers, but you have the law on your side. Before Daniel could respond, headlights swept across the farmhouse windows again. Multiple vehicles this time, approaching fast and without the courtesy of previous visits. Wright's patience had apparently run out earlier than advertised. "Get Dad to the storm cellar," Daniel said quietly, moving toward the window. "This is about to get messy." Through the glass, he counted 6 vehicles surrounding the farmhouse. SUVs and pickup trucks filled with men who looked more like mercenaries than corporate employees. Wright stepped from the lead vehicle wearing military-style clothing instead of his usual expensive suit. This wasn't a business negotiation anymore. It was an assault. "Daniel Harper," Wright's voice carried amplification from a bullhorn. "You have 60 seconds to bring me those encryption keys, or we come in and take them from your corpse." "The legal documents," Maggie hissed, gathering the patent papers. "If Wright gets these, he won't." Daniel helped her stuff the documents into a waterproof bag. "Get to the cellar with Dad. I'll buy you time to escape through the old tunnel." "What tunnel?" "The one Dad and I dug during the Cold War scare in the 80s. Runs from the cellar to the old barn. I'd hoped never to need it." Maggie looked at her brother with new understanding. "You're going to surrender, aren't you? To protect us." "I'm going to do what needs doing." Daniel checked the chamber of his father's hunting rifle, muscle memory from childhood deer season serving him well. "Just promise me you'll get those documents to the FBI. Let them deal with Wright's military connections." "Danny, promise me." "I promise." She grabbed his face in both hands, sister to brother. "But you better survive this, because Dad's got secrets to tell, and you're going to hear them." Outside, Wright's amplified voice counted down their final seconds. 30, 29, 28. Daniel kissed Maggie's forehead and moved toward the front door, rifle in hand and Marcus's words echoing in his memory. "If something happens to me, remember the failsafe we discussed, the one you said would never be necessary." Maybe it was time to prove his former partner wrong about that too. Daniel stepped onto the farmhouse porch with his father's hunting rifle, facing 6 vehicles full of armed men in the pre-dawn darkness. Thomas Wright stood illuminated by headlights, no longer the polished businessman, but a predator finally dropping his mask. Behind him, mercenaries checked weapons with professional efficiency that made Daniel's wilderness survival skills seem quaint by comparison. "Smart choice, Harper," Wright called out. "Drop the rifle and walk toward me slowly." "First, let me ask you something," Daniel replied, keeping the weapon lowered but ready. "What did my father do to you 40 years ago that's worth all this destruction?" Wright's laugh carried decades of bitter hatred. "Your saintly father never told you about Vietnam, did he? About the helicopter crash that killed my brother while Robert Harper walked away without a scratch?" Dad served with honor. He has medals. Your father left my brother Michael to die in that wreckage while he saved his own skin. Promised he'd come back for him, then abandoned him when the enemy closed in. Wright's composure cracked completely. Michael bled out alone in a rice paddy because your coward father chose survival over loyalty. The truth hit Daniel like physical blow. His father's nightmares, the drinking years, the way Robert never talked about the war, it all made horrible sense. You've been planning revenge for 40 years? I've been planning justice. Everything your family built was paid for with my brother's blood money. The farm, your education, your sister's law degree, all of it bought with coward's gold. From the storm cellar behind the house, Daniel heard the faint scrape of the tunnel entrance opening. Maggie and Robert were escaping as planned, buying him precious time to end this standoff. But Wright's men had positioned themselves to cover all approaches to the farmhouse, including the old barn where the tunnel emerged. Even if that's true, what does it have to do with my technology? With destroying innocent people's lives? Because I discovered that your precious algorithms can do something very special. They can track down war criminals who've been hiding for decades, veterans who abandoned their posts, left their brothers to die, then came home to play hero. Wright gestured toward the darkened farmhouse. Your father thought he'd buried his shame, but digital archaeology never forgets. Daniel's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Wright didn't just want the encryption codes for weapon sales. He wanted to use the behavioral prediction algorithms to hunt down aging veterans, exposing their wartime failures to destroy their families generations later. Personal vendettas scaled up through artificial intelligence. You're insane. I'm thorough, and thanks to your technology, I'll be able to identify every coward, every deserter, every soldier who broke under pressure and left better men to die. Their children and grandchildren will learn what their heroes really were. Drop the rifle, Daniel, one of Wright's mercenaries called out, raising his own weapon. This ends now. Daniel looked back at the farmhouse where 3 generations of Harpers had lived, loved, and made the choices that define human character. His father had carried the guilt of a split-second wartime decision for 40 years, letting it poison his relationships and drive his son into exile. But guilt and shame were different from cowardice. Robert Harper had spent his life trying to atone, building something meaningful from the ashes of his worst moment. You're right about one thing, Wright, Daniel said quietly. This does end now. Instead of dropping the rifle, he raised it toward the nearest vehicle and fired. The shot shattered the headlight, plunging half the compound into darkness. In the confusion that followed, Daniel rolled off the porch and sprinted toward the old equipment shed where his father kept the tractor. Wright's men opened fire, muzzle flashes strobing through the night like deadly lightning. Bullets splintered wood and shattered glass as Daniel reached the shed and dove inside. The ancient John Deere tractor sat where it had for 30 years, but Daniel wasn't interested in farm equipment. Hidden beneath a tarp in the corner was his real target, the portable satellite uplink he'd built during his hermit years, designed to tap into internet infrastructure from his remote forest cabin. 3 years of paranoid preparation had taught him to always have an escape route, even from his escape routes. His fingers flew over the compact keyboard as Wright's men surrounded the shed. The satellite connection was weak but functional, linking him to servers he hadn't accessed since fleeing Silicon Valley. Marcus's fail-safe protocol lay buried in the system architecture like a digital time bomb, waiting for the authentication codes only Daniel possessed. Harper, Wright's voice came from just outside the shed. You're surrounded. Come out and I'll make this quick. I'm a little busy right now, Daniel called back, typing commands he'd hoped never to use. On the screen, system diagnostics confirmed what Marcus had built into their creation, a complete kill switch that would destroy not just the stolen algorithms, but every implementation, every backup, every trace of the technology they'd created. Destroying the servers won't save you, Wright shouted. I have copies stored in 12 countries. No, Daniel replied, entering the final authentication sequence. You have 12 countries worth of worthless code that's about to turn into digital ash. The screen flashed green as the failsafe activated. Across the globe, Marcus's hidden protocols began their work, corrupting databases, overwriting backup files, turning 3 years of stolen research into random noise. Wright's military clients would wake up to discover their expensive new weapons were nothing but expensive paperweights. Gunfire erupted again as Wright's men realized what was happening. Bullets punched through the shed walls, but Daniel was already moving. He kicked out the backboards and rolled into the pre-dawn darkness just as the building erupted in splinters behind him. The tunnel entrance behind the barn stood open, Maggie's voice echoing from below. "Danny, this way!" He slid down the earthen slope into the Cold War-era tunnel his father had dug during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on reinforced walls as Maggie helped him descend. At the far end, Robert sat in his wheelchair, looking stronger than he had in years despite the circumstances. "Did you activate it?" his father asked quietly. "You knew about the failsafe?" "Son, I may not understand computers, but I understand men who build things they pray they'll never have to use." Robert's eyes held clarity that had been missing since the stroke. "Is it finished?" "The technology's gone. All of it. Wright's left with empty servers and a lot of very angry clients." Daniel knelt beside his father's wheelchair. "Dad, about Vietnam." "Wright told you." Robert nodded heavily. "I've been waiting 40 years for this conversation. Was he right? Did you leave his brother behind?" Robert was quiet for so long that Daniel thought the stroke had taken his speech again. When he finally spoke, his words came clear and strong. "Michael Wright was my best friend. When our helicopter went down, he was trapped in the wreckage with both legs crushed. The enemy was closing in, and extraction was impossible." "So you left him?" "I stayed with him for 6 hours while he bled out, holding his hand and sharing my morphine. Michael made me promise to survive, to go home and live the life he couldn't. His last words were, 'Tell my brother I died fighting, not afraid.'" "Then why does Thomas think—" "Because I never delivered that message. When I got home, I was too broken to face Thomas with the truth. Let him believe his brother died a hero's death instead of scared and in pain, calling for his mother in a rice paddy." Robert's voice cracked. "I thought silence was kindness. I was wrong." Above them, explosions rocked the night as Wright's men discovered the tunnel entrance. Flashlight beams probed the darkness as boots thundered down the wooden steps. "We need to move," Maggie urged, but Robert shook his head. "No more running. It ends here." He struggled to stand from the wheelchair, leaning heavily on Daniel's arm. "Thomas! Thomas Wright! Come down here and face me like the men we used to be." Wright appeared at the tunnel entrance flanked by armed mercenaries, his expensive clothes torn and dirty from the night's violence. In the harsh LED lighting, he looked older, more fragile than the corporate predator who'd terrorized their family. "Hello, Bobby," Wright said quietly, using Robert's wartime nickname. 40 years and you finally stop hiding." "I never hid from what I did, Tommy. I hid from what I failed to do." Robert straightened as much as his damaged body allowed. "Your brother died brave. He died protecting me, making sure I'd survive to carry his story home. And I failed him by never giving you that story. He died because you abandoned him. He died because war is hell, and good men don't always make it home. But he made me promise to live, Tommy, to build something meaningful from the life he gave me." Robert gestured toward Daniel and Maggie. "This farm, these children, 40 years of growing food instead of destroying it. That's Michael's legacy, too." Wright's weapon trembled in his grip. "You left him to die alone. I held his hand until his heart stopped beating. I closed his eyes and said the prayers he taught me. I carried his dog tags home and buried them under the oak tree where we used to play as children." Robert's voice carried 4 decades of grief finally released. "I loved your brother like my own family, Tommy. Losing him broke something in me that never healed." The tunnel fell silent except for the distant sound of sirens approaching through Millbrook Valley. Someone, probably Claire from the diner, had called the authorities about the gunfire and explosions at the Harper farm. Wright stared at Robert for long moments, seeing not the enemy he'd created in his imagination, but the broken old soldier who'd carried survivors' guilt for 40 years. The weapon slowly lowered as understanding replaced hatred in his eyes. "Michael always said you were the best of us," Wright whispered. "Even when we were kids, he said Bobby Harper would rather die than let a friend down. I let you down by not telling you the truth. I let Michael down by not honoring his sacrifice properly. Robert reached out a shaking hand. Can an old fool ask forgiveness from an old friend? The sirens grew louder as FBI vehicles surrounded the farm above them. Daniel's satellite transmission had done more than destroy Wright's stolen algorithms. It had triggered automatic alerts to federal cybercrime units who'd been tracking the illegal weapon sales for months. Wright looked at Robert's outstretched hand, then at Daniel and Maggie, then at his own armed mercenaries who'd been ready to murder a family over decades-old grief. The predator mask finally fell away completely, revealing the broken man underneath. "Ah, Bobby," Wright said, tears streaming down his face. "What have I become?" 3 months later, Daniel stood on the wooden platform he'd built in the meadow between the farmhouse and forest edge. The structure served as a stage for community gatherings now, a place where neighbors came to share stories, children performed school plays, and healing happened one conversation at a time. Thomas Wright sat in the front row beside Robert's wheelchair, both old men diminished by age and illness, but somehow more human than they'd been in years. Wright's cooperation with federal investigators had dismantled an international network of illegal weapons trafficking, earning him a reduced sentence and the chance to make amends before prison claimed his remaining years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel addressed the crowd of townspeople who'd gathered for the weekly farmers market that now operated from the Harper farm. "I'd like to tell you about a technology that should never have existed, and why sometimes the most important code a programmer can write is the delete key." Claire from the diner laughed from her booth selling fresh pies. Maggie looked up from her new law office, a converted barn where she now specialized in helping veterans access benefits they'd earned decades ago. Robert dozed peacefully in his wheelchair, finally free from the nightmares that had haunted 4 decades of sleep. As Daniel spoke about responsibility, forgiveness, and the courage to destroy what you've created when it threatens to destroy others, sunlight streamed through the pine trees that still protected his forest sanctuary. He'd found his way home not by running from the past, but by facing it honestly, choosing family over solitude, and building something beautiful from the ashes of old mistakes. The platform stood solid beneath his feet, strong enough to support the weight of truth-telling and the hope of new beginnings. In the distance, his cabin waited among the trees, not a hiding place anymore, but a retreat where a former hermit could find peace between the demands of community and the stillness of ancient forests. Some stories end with victory or defeat. This one ended with the quiet satisfaction of building something worth standing on, together.